David. God sent the person. The woman thought that God sent the help she needed, right? So I believe that too. God sent the person that woman needed at that moment. God did that more times than we can count with David. God kept sending the people that David needed. God did that so many times. No matter how David failed, God never gave up on him and continually placed people in his life to lead him where he needed to go. I think God does that for all of us. Maybe not quite as dramatically as David, but God does that for all of us. Continually places the people in front of us that we need to lead where we need to go. Sometimes the people that get placed in our lives are trusted advisors and friends. Sometimes they are people that we find a bit off-putting, perhaps the man who opened the car door that day. And sometimes they are downright annoying, aren't they? The people who give the message we need to get. But God knows what we need, and God refuses to give up on us. The second lesson is from David's death. When David died, his son Solomon took over as king. Solomon, one of David's many children, was David's child with Bathsheba, the son born after the whole ugly earlier episode in which the first child died, as God said would happen. In today's reading, you may have noticed that the virtues of David were extolled with no mention of his vices and significant shortcomings, which were plenty. When God asked Solomon what God should give to him, Solomon spoke of his father David in glowing terms. He said, "You have shown great and steadfast love to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness and in righteousness and in uprightness of heart toward you." Now, it was certainly true what Solomon said about David, but he also left a lot out, didn't he? He left a lot out. Have you ever been to the funeral of someone who wasn't very nice? That ever happened in your life? Been to a funeral of somebody who wasn't very nice? The old admonition comes not to speak ill of the dead, and so that takes over, I think. And sometimes someone who was a real so-and-so in life sounds like a pillar of the community. Have you ever been in such a service? You're thinking, am I at the right church? Is this the right service that's going on? Or a reasonably normal person, mostly nice and upright, suddenly becomes Mother Teresa, at least on the basis of what's said there at the funeral service. This phenomena is sometimes called revisionist history, making the facts more acceptable, more pleasant, more positive after the fact. In the case of Solomon and God talking about David, it might suggest the last lesson from David that I want to mention, the one that comes after his death. Everyone leaves a legacy. Everyone leaves a legacy. And I believe that God can repair even events gone by. Solomon knew that his father wasn't perfect. He grew up in the palace. He had seen David at his horse. He knew the truth. He also knew that God had claimed David's heart from the beginning, and God kept working with David until the end. Even after having grown up with such a flawed father, Solomon asked God for, and this is a quote from Scripture, an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil. God was pleased with Solomon's request, and God granted that request. God used and brought to Solomon's remembrance the best of David, and Solomon passed it on. Perhaps you are one of those less than perfect people. Maybe you cringe a bit at thinking about what folks might say at your funeral service. Maybe not inside, but certainly out in the parking lot before or after the service when they say what they really think, as opposed to what gets said in public inside the church. I believe that God allows the best to be emphasized, not the worst, which doesn't mean that we should take that, well, I can do what I want, no matter what the outcome kind of attitude. But I do believe that God's power to heal transcends time and it transcends death. David was, after all, as we said at the beginning, the man after God's own heart. May we continue to be those who learn from him and those who continue to seek God all of our days. Thanks be to God. Amen.